right, thank you for staying with Daybreak. We're still having this conversation on the teenage crisis. Dr. Stephen Kaliti, a gynecologist and head division of reproductive and maternal health at the Ministry of Health, is still with me on phone. Dr. Rose Misati, public health specialist, is also here with me online. Wahu Kagwe, recording artist and a parent to a teenager, is also with me here in studio. And Abigail Mburu, who's a student and a teenager herself, who believes we are dinosaur ages, is also with us here. Now let's talk about something different here, and it's SGBV before Wahu reacts to what Abigail was saying earlier on. And Dr. Kaliti, I'd like to bring you back on this. Is it also, how would you define SGBV for whoever is listening today? At what point does it become now categorized under SGBV?
It is, again, I would say it's a thin line, because it must be, an act that is occurring between two people who have the ability, they can consent, and it's mutually, acceptable to both parties. Anything that is sort of short of that, then it leaves one party feeling sort of degraded or violated or disempowered in one another, because of just by virtue of the agenda or use of the, a sexual relationship as a tool towards that. And I'll say that basically it is violence, and we see it more often, targeting women or the females, and it's a manifestation or historically an equal power relation between men and women that has been perpetuated over the ages, over eons. And I can say it's one of the, crucial mechanisms socially by which women are forced into sort of a subordinate position, compared with men. And that's why there's been a lot of emphasis on the girl child. That is not to say that we do not have the same also affecting the boy child and the men. It does happen. It's all that it's disproportionate. And because of the way we have been in a patriarchal sort of society, the female and the women are more affected.
So from your experience, what are the actual steps someone should take? For example, if you're talking about rape.
Now, we have set up an elaborate system across the country, and the first step is that to know that if you have been sexually violated or you have been, abused or you've been raped, as you say you've been a victim of rape, one reason or another, then the first step is to know that we do have government facilities across the country that are willing and ready to assist you and to help you back to recovery and to prevent you from falling back to sort of the same exposure. We do have hotlines that are call-free. All you need to do is pick up your phone, and we have popularized those numbers across all the health facilities. And also do have GBV, posts within police centers and desks that are just dedicated for that. That all you need to do is just make a call, or if it is safe, walk in and, identify yourself, and you'll have a lot of helping hands that are going to be there. Because there's a lot that you need to do. Number one, you're traumatized. We need to make sure that, number one, you remain alive from the situation. So make a judgment on what is happening, and the first priority is to make sure that you get out of that situation alive where feasible, because that is what we hope. And then after that, please plug in to the national support system that is there, that has been established by the government across the health facilities, across government, police stations, through the Interior Ministry, and apply it and just present yourself, and you find a lot of helping hands. Because we'll take you through a series of issues. We need to counsel you. We need to debrief you about the excesses that have taken place. And more important, we need to prevent you from the consequences that may happen. Some of them, we can prevent them immediately. And if it is because in some cases it can be life-threatening, we need to make sure that your life is secured. So the most important thing is that do not feel ashamed or hold back or try to keep it and zip it to yourself. No, speak up. Because it is about your life here we are talking about. And you have helping hands that are not judgmental, that will take you through. You have professionals who have been taken through, training, and they will professionally handle you to make sure that you are back on your feet as the shortest time possible at the least harm. Across the country, we do have that. Trevor.
But just to be clear, Dr. Kaliti, there's no consent with any person who's below the age of 18, right? That is now considered assault.
The Child Act is very clear. Any sex with a minor, and that a minor is anybody who is below the age of 18 constitutionally, is actually an illegal act, and it is a capital offense that is punishable. And you had, I think, His Excellency raised his frustrations on why we are condoning some of these acts within ourselves, things like, child marriage, things like female genital mutilation, that have been used as a catalyst for re-entry into marriage life and sexual activity for children. Those are some of the things that you had His Excellency being vexed as a society. Those are things that we should not condone and we must not condone. So we are talking about, anyone who is below 18 years and is engaged in sexual activity, that's basically violation, and it's very clear. It's a constitutional violation, and the law is very clear on that.
Yeah.
It's just an issue of trying to make sure that we implement that and implement the law to the letter and to be able to be observant of the same.
Okay. Let me bring in Dr. Rose on this. Dr. Rose, what is the best way of dealing with this issue around SGBV? Because there's a tendency of blaming the victim. A young girl comes to you, tells you that there was a bit of an incident with a friend who happens to be a boy or man, but the first thing is to blame the person. Ulienda kufanya nini huko? What is the best way of dealing with this situation?
Thank you so much, Trevor. SGBV is never the fault of the victim. Wherever the victim was, whatever they were doing, whatever they were wearing is inconsequential. By victim shaming and blaming, we make the victim carry the shame and the guilt that should be carried by the perpetrator. The perpetrator is the one to be asked, why did you do this to the person? And there are many children, especially, who remain painfully silent because they fear that they will be judged, they will be condemned, they will be blamed, they will be criticized. So the best way, so far, I can say there are many other ways, but to do is to empower. From a very early age, from around the age of 3, 4, teach the children about their body parts. And there is even a song to that. These are my private parts. No one should touch them. No one should see them. No one should lick them. Make sure you add lick them. And name every body part by the correct name. Don't use nicknames, Dudu, Susu, I don't know, respect, I don't know what. Name every body part and tell them what the function is. You may begin, so when you begin very early, teach them to clean their private parts. Let them know that this part you clean. And privacy, so that even when they are changing, they're in a private space and no one should insist on seeing. Teach them about touch. You know, there's confusing touch, there's wrong touch. And let them know that if anybody touches them in a way they feel uncomfortable, if anybody wants to look at their private parts, they can always report. And when they report, let them know that you will not judge them, you will believe them, and you will take action. And as children grow older, maybe by around the age of 7, let them know what sex is. Because if you don't, they are going to be curious, and somebody is even going to say, let me show you what sex is. Teach them what sex is. Don't wait until teenage. The mistake many parents make is that they wait until teenage. So when children are abused and they are younger, they have no language. They have no language to communicate. In fact, in many of our vernaculars, like even in my Kisi language, the name of the private parts, the male and the female genitalia, the name is, it sounds so bad and it has so much shame around it that even good girls are not even supposed to say that word. So when it happens that somebody is abused, they can't even communicate. They have no language. The shame is so much. They don't know how to express themselves. Yeah. So it's always important, even as parents, to be vigilant. Be very vigilant and very suspicious. I always say err on the side of caution. Yeah. If you see that a child who was maybe very outgoing, very social, is changing and they're withdrawing, it's important to investigate what is happening. And let them know that anybody can be an abuser, because actually statistics show that up to 90% of those who abuse children, there are people who are known to them, there are people who trust them. I mean, there are people they trust, there are people who are meant to be offering nurture and protection. That's why it becomes very confusing, because this person is so good and they're meant to love me. What they are doing to me is confusing and uncomfortable, but nobody has ever given me a language to say what it is. So it's important also when we get to know that this is the perpetrator needs to be held to account. This thing of in certain communities or families, people saying, oh, we are sitting down to sort it kinyumbani. There's nothing kinyumbani about abuse. The abusers are meant to be held to account. The law is meant to take its course, and the shame and the guilt is meant to be squarely apportioned to them. The victim is innocent. It is not their fault. It's not because of what they did or they didn't do that made them to be abused. Thank you.
Wahu, you shared a very personal story on your Instagram page, and I don't mean to make you relieve it, but what kind of feedback have you received from that? And at what point did you know that this was assault? Because yours was exactly what she's saying that anybody can be an abuser, someone who's very close to you.
Yeah. So for me, when I was 9 years old, my abuser was my cousin, who was 10 years my senior. He was 19 and I was 9. And it was an issue where, like she has said, I trusted him. You know, he's my big cousin, so he, you know, we played together and all that. So it was, it really broke my young heart. I remember crying. I remember, you know, it was an extremely heartbreaking situation. So, sorry, Trevor, I've lost my train of thought. What was your question?
No, we were talking about with the kind of feedback that you received on this.
So when I shared my story, and the reason why I shared my story, number one, even now, excuse me, because it was never a conversation for the longest that is a go conversation. Yeah. How I seemed to deal with it, or how I tried to deal with it, was to make it a non-issue. But every time I talk about it, I cry. Yeah. So I said it's about time that I heal from this. So when I shared it, it was part of my own process of healing. Yeah. And in the hope that I'll help somebody else out there to begin their own process of healing. And let me tell you, Trevor, the feedback I got, I could not handle it. I remember crying in bed, crying, just looking at all the stories from the different women. There are those who are sharing on my page. There are those who are DMing me very, very hurtful situations, situations where they were saying something happened when they were young and their parents didn't believe them, their parents blamed them, or, you know, and it was terrible. The things people walk around, the emotional wounds people walk around with, and it's so important. I mean, I love that the ministry has support right now, as the expert was saying, you know, and people need to know that it is okay to seek help. It is not your fault this happened. That guy or that woman, because women also are perpetrators, should not have touched you that way. He should not have done anything to you. It is not your fault, you know, and just to begin their healing. Okay. Yeah.
Abigail, I want to bring you in on this, and maybe it's not even a fair question because at your tender age, but would you know what the difference is between someone who's about to abuse you? Would you know what that is? Do you know what that is? And do your peers know that this is wrong? And it doesn't matter whether you were studying with them, you went to see them in school, it doesn't matter. Do you know at what point it becomes wrong?
Yes, I do.
And what would you describe that as for your peers? Because there are some of them who say that when they speak to their parents, they don't believe them. And then you also don't want to be blamed for having gone to see that person. Do you know what the difference is? At what point do you know that this is now wrong, in your own definition?
Okay. Well, for the part for you going to a certain place or dressing up in a certain way to attract people, that's like being a rape apologist. Like, it's giving an excuse for sexual abuse, which is not right. Like, you're not supposed to give an excuse. Just like, yes, I can be wearing something that is, well, intimidating you, but you have to be emotionally intelligent and react in a certain way so that you now don't end up doing something wrong. Because you can't now excuse yourself, oh, she was wearing like this, that means that she was just calling or seeking attention. No, that's not the right thing to do. Yeah.
But you know what to do when such a thing happens?
Yes.
What do you do?
Okay, I don't know the line for calling, but I'm pretty sure I'd try to report it. Yeah. Also go talk to my parents and a friend. But first I'd pray, just hoping everything, you know, maybe it could have happened and then there is no evidence. Or maybe the person, I couldn't even see the person, it was a night. Like, maybe I'm just walking on the streets and then something bad just happens and I don't know how to explain myself. So I'd pray that, you know, like, I'd ask God to help me be able, like, for people to understand me, to realize that I'm telling the truth and stuff like that. Yeah. Do
you feel like there's a gap in information to the young people like yourselves in the event that such a thing happens? You would, and it is confusing. It is not something that is one size fits all because the situations are very different.
Yeah.
But would you want more information in terms of, so in the event this happens, what do I do? Which number do I call? How do I do it? Where do I go?
Yes, I would want, because I feel like it's not something that's talked about so much. To be honest, I didn't even know there was a number you should call until right now. Yeah, you're not really told like the steps. I only find out these things when I see posts on Instagram and everything. And I remember there's a time, I think last month, where there's this girl who got raped and people were posting it all over Instagram. And then now it triggered people who were so traumatized and couldn't speak about what they were going through. And they started now sharing their stories. And there were a lot of people who were saying, you're only posting this for recognition, for more followers. You're only posting this to bash someone else. Stop doing this to my boy. Stop doing this and this and this. And I felt really hurt because no one deserves to feel like it's their fault, like they're only speaking up about something just because it comes later because they were too traumatized to even speak about it at the moment doesn't mean it's not true, doesn't mean it's not validated.
Yeah.
Yes.
Do you have systems where you can talk about these issues, especially in school? Are there clubs, counseling clubs, or a counselor you can speak to?
At school, yes, we have counselors. So in the event something like that happened in school, you could go talk to your counselor, or if you're closest to like a teacher, you could go talk to your homeroom tutor. Yeah.
Okay, let me bring back Dr. Kaliti on this. Dr. Kaliti, you know, the main thing we're wondering here is the solutions around it, because we don't seem to have the silver bullet around SGBV. And first of all, from your statistics, is it true then that it has risen during the COVID-19 period?
Yes, Trevor, I agree we do not have a silver bullet, but it is also a measure of our civilization as a people, because SGBV is like the ultimate kind of, aggression that speaks quite of an uncouth society that should sort of outgrown some of those practices. But here we are, during COVID-19, there are a lot of things that could have that definitely perpetrated a rise in SGBV, and we saw that. And some of them were containment measures because you found that during the early times, especially around March, April, when COVID came in and the fear was reigning across the system, then people are locked up and the abuses are perpetrated in different manners, both within the same household because people are confined and they do not have a lot of avenue to venture out and get engaged in more, meaningful activities. And also more important is that at that time, help was sort of a little bit restricted. Because you're within and you do not have a lot of access either to the system or to the social services that are supposed to alleviate and prevent some of those occurrences. Yeah. So we saw that, and also we also saw an element of violence that also meted out by some of the measures that we put in place to contain the spread of COVID-19. So it is true there was a spike in SGBV during the time of COVID-19, and this was not unique to Kenya. It was a global phenomenon that we noticed, and it occurs especially during fragile settings like the times of war and during the times of pandemics, even just like Corona and other pandemics that have happened before. So it's an issue of making sure that we put systems during such measures to sort of preempt and be able to prevent a surge and of vulnerable populations around that period of time.
Yeah. Dr. Kaliti, there's a statement here from Twitter, one of our viewers here, Peter Ngure. He says that the conversation is very timely. While the parent is core, there is no framework for age-appropriate sex education, which should be added to comprehensive sexuality education. But the government is not keen to have the curriculum out.
Trevor, that is not a correct statement that the government is not keen. We are more keen than anyone else, and I just told you that we are happy discussions between the Ministry of Health, the Ministry of Education, the Ministry of Gender and Youth Affairs, and we are developing a competent curriculum on sexual and reproductive health education for the country. What is being called a comprehensive sexuality education, Trevor, we have gone through it and we have spent a lot of years training in these matters, and we have several experts who have looked at it, and I can tell you the content is not appropriate for the age. And I'll tell you, the age of a child grows in stages. And there are some areas where, that's why, Trevor, when you're growing up, when you're maybe the age of 4 years, you ask where did children came from, and because of your age, your mother was, or your dad was kind enough to tell you that children came from trees, and that was enough. Then as you rose up, you were told the children came from markets. And then by the time you go to the age of 19, when you ask the same question, you're told to go and find out yourself from others because you've reached that age. What has happened in comprehensive sexuality education, and I do dare you and I challenge you to go and have a look at the content, it has very explicit pornographic material to children, and that is not appropriate. Because an inquisitive mind, if you expose them to, pornographic material at that time, it may have lifetime impact, and you may not be able to reverse that course. is actually curiosity. You may be thinking that you are teaching a child about how to play sex safely or something like that, but in essence, you're actually creating curiosity and arousing curiosity on this child to go and experiment on the same. Those are the things you're balancing as a government, because we do have fiduciary role. It is our ability, it's our role to make sure that whatever is filtered out goes out. It doesn't matter that it has been pushed out from elsewhere. There are some cultures and beliefs as a nation that we hold dear to. And the president has, has stated that this very clearly. It has to be culturally sensitive and age appropriate. And that is what we are contextualizing, so that we give you material that is sensitive enough to our culture and to our people and is appropriate for the age that we are talking about. So we have that, a family education sort of curriculum that is holistic and that does not commodify sexuality. Because we may have a curriculum that is actually translating these teenagers to commodities so that you create market for substance and all that. We are not in that business as a government. We are there to make sure that we give the proper guidance and make sure that the children are guided accordingly, according to their age. And on top of that, that's what we are developing, Trevor.
All right, brilliant. Let's bring in Dr. Rose. Dr. Rose, there's a feedback here from Najib Kibirige on Twitter. Says teenagers are not the problem. We, the parents, are the problem. We think that letting kids decide for themselves comes minus limits. I have them and I love them, but they know who I am, what my likes are and what my dislikes are. This is Africa. Give them their freedom, but be active in watching them. Do you agree with that statement, Dr. Rose?
In part, yes. Let me just begin with the yes, and then I will get to, the other part. Yes, as we are raising children from a very early age, it's important, as I said, to establish that trust and to have the control when they're young. As they grow older, we need to loosen that control as they get to teenage, so that then we can set limits that are very clear. Bearing in mind that as the parents, the children are depending on us for the leadership and for the guidance. And so needing to letting the child to be able to decide is important, because we train them skills. Unfortunately, as parents, when we over-control children, we raise children who don't have skills, who cannot make their own decision. So that's important. Now, the other part that I was saying, maybe I can say a half no, is that parents are bashed a lot, not bearing in mind that these parents were also children one day, or sometime they were also children, and probably they were over-controlled and they never learned any better. So they end up doing the same to their children. So these parents, are they equipped with skills themselves? Okay, so that is to begin with, so that then we don't put a lot of blame on the parents to the point of glorifying the children. I don't believe in beating the living daylights out of children, but I believe in setting firm controls with logical consequences. So that, for example, because we are talking social media, we are saying, okay, you are going to be using this phone maybe 2 hours a day, because your preoccupation right now, you need to learn skills, you need to read. So if we agreed it's 2 hours and the child takes 4 hours, it means that tomorrow I will take away the phone. Those are logical consequences, and that is how life is. I mean, you use your money in 2 weeks. The rest of the 2 weeks, you don't have money. So we need to teach them skills, thinking of later, not just now, but thinking of lifelong, okay? So it's important not to also bash parents too much, because sometimes parents walk carrying a lot of guilt and a lot of shame and thinking that they need to be perfect. We don't need to be perfect parents. We need to be loving parents. As Wahoo said that the daughter told her, you have only been a parent for 10 years. Once we are loving, we will make mistakes, but then we learn through our mistakes and set logical consequences, not relationship consequences. There's a difference. Let me explain. Logical consequences is whereby a child knows, if I overstepped the time in using my phone, I will forfeit my phone the following day. Relationship consequences is whereby if you overstepped use of your phone, I'm going to alienate myself from you. Maybe we threaten, we criticize, and the perception is that we don't love the child, we don't value the child as we would value them. So the communication is that I love you so much, I want the best for you. And that's why I'm doing this, so that you can learn self-discipline, so that you can learn fortitude, you can learn patience, because you need to coexist in a well-ordered society for your good growing up. Thank you.
Wahoo, there's another one here. Manchester, he calls himself. He says, parents must be on the front line to help guide these young generation. Jacob Abere Matlala says, just listening to the conversation on teen pregnancies in this COVID-19 period, factors that have led to this is beyond teaching about Victoria and Victor, blah, blah, blah. It's parents and guardians who have no time, and the poverty and rush for money is taking precedence.
Wow.
Again, on the parents.
Yes. What I feel maybe I can say is we really need to define for ourselves what is parenting first, right? Is parenting just providing financial, whatever, food, shelter, clothing for the child? Yeah. What is really parenting? And I think that is a conversation that I keep having even with myself. You know, like, what is my role? And the guidance bit is so important. That really is where the rubber meets the road. Yeah. And also understanding you're also flawed. I don't have all the answers, you know, but I love you regardless of me not having all the answers. Yeah. The things I don't know, we shall figure out together. But really crystallizing what that is and spending enough time with the child and thinking through where they are at, having airing situations, I think those are the things we need to have with ourselves as parents, so that we're able to then be impactful in terms of what are we inputting into these kids. And a lot of us, you know, I'm a social media immigrant. Yeah, I keep telling my daughter, when I started music, there was no YouTube. There was no YouTube. So she's like, so how do people know? Like, for her, it's so confusing. So what did you do for people to know your music and all that? So it was, I don't know how to properly engage as a parent on social, because I have never been a parent to this social media generation. I know there are positives and there are negatives, but I cannot then remove myself. We have to be, I can't also tell her altogether, don't be on social media, don't be whatever. But my role is to keep trying as much as possible to get as much information as I can, and having the conversations with both of them, right? So defining what my role as the parent is, and according that role enough time. Enough time. And I think that's one of the things God has been teaching us through this COVID, is we've been absent. You know, we've lost it as parents. We've lost it a lot. I'm gonna be a bit hard on myself as a parent against Dr. Ri's advice, but I'm like, we get home from hustling and we are tired, and all I have time for is to check your homework. How was your day? Please don't go into a lot of detail. Just high level, summarize for me, because I'm tired. I need to sleep, because tomorrow I have a 5 a.m. I need to, you know. So I think God has really been telling us, rethink what your role is in this. And it has, you'll be shocked when you sit down in the kitchen with your child and just having conversations, how much she's confused or how much she's processing and how much. So it's important to accord that role enough time. Okay.
Abigail, Cliff Jaden here on Twitter says, as teenagers, we just want to live so much on the present and enjoy the moment and forget that we have a future which will be haunted by the actions we are acting on currently. It is a wake-up call for youths. We are killing our future in the name of fun. Do you agree with that statement?
Yes,
the youth are killing their future in the name of fun?
Yes.
Is this just instant gratification that is pushing you, the teenagers, to do what you're doing right now? And how can that be mitigated then?
Okay. I agree that he said that, you know, you do these things so that you can feel good in the moment, but then forget about the future. But people often confuse having fun and draining your future. Like, you can have too much fun or just go full and like just beyond the limits, and then now just affect yourself a lot in the future. And people, like the youth, need to establish like the barrier. There's a difference. They need to understand that there's a difference between having fun and actually now doing something that could ruin your future.
And now, if going forward, what kind of message would you like to hear from the society, from your parents, and it's in general? Because somehow it seems what they are saying now may not be reaching the teenagers, because it's still happening. Is it that it's not reaching the teenagers, or is it that now the negatives are more amplified now? What kind of message would you want to hear from the parents to understand that this is the way to go, without necessarily feeling like your rights are being infringed upon, like we don't trust you. How would you like that message curated for you?
I think I'd want most parents to understand that, you know, they're dealing with a different generation and they have different, like the influence, the peer pressure that's in there is not the same as the previous one, so it's different. And now also to understand how to explain it, because now when you go bashing your kid, like there's a lot of internalized misogyny coming from mothers telling you that, I had a friend, my sister's friend, her mom told her, I'm so glad you're fat, so that now no boys are going to try anything. And that's not something that's really nice. Like, it really just crushes you and makes you feel really bad about yourself. So you should now be more accepting of your kid, normalize conversations, and actually like build them up, make them feel good, make them realize their self-worth, so that they can't stoop down to a level and make them start doing things that you just look at them and you're like, is this my child? Yeah.
And this information you think needs to come from parents and not from reading materials or groups? Like, for example, when you speak to your peers, do you guys have what we call in our generation a come to Jesus moment, where you sit down and say that this is the right thing to do, this is the wrong thing to do, and just share your stories amongst yourselves and understand that if this happened to you, then it's wrong, if this happened to you, then it's fine, and this is how you mitigate it? Do you have that kind of societal network within your own peers?
Yes, I actually do have them with my peers, but sometimes it's important to have it with your parents too. Because yes, you know, your peers, they're as small as you are, so they don't, like, you probably know the same amount of information. Maybe they know a bit more, but like you're all on the same level. So now you have to hear it from your parents who have maybe experienced or like, you know, seen or like just understand all that is happening, so they can explain it to you and make you feel like understand it better, rather than just hearing it from the news, from the TV, or
Okay. Let me bring back Dr. Kaliti. Dr. Kaliti, I know you want to make comments on this issue of SGBV, but I also wanted to delve into your knowledge a bit as a gynecologist and talk to us about this issue of family planning. Because there's been some reports also in the media that there's been a lot of uptake of pills that may not necessarily be very good in the long run. First of all, is there any family planning method that you would recommend?
Trevor, again, that it depends, and that is a complex question, because family planning needs, and again, take note, we're talking about family planning for people who need to plan their families. Family planning needs are very varied, and they differ per person as much as your fingerprints usually differ. So what we usually have, there are various methods that are available, and those available methods are what we call basically the method mix. The method mix is like if you went to search for family planning methods within a healthcare provider or within a shop, whatever you'll find in that basket, because there are several methods and each person has unique needs. And we cannot apply like one shoe fits them all. That may be a little bit difficult to generalize, because there are special needs. Some of them are guided by your health status, by your age, by your family, needs. What is it that you need to, do you need to space? Do you need to limit? There are a lot of dynamics that come into play for you to decide this is the ideal method for me, Trevor. So I cannot tell you there's a particular method that is ideal, because it all depends on who it is and what it is for.
But Dr. I'd like to leverage on your knowledge on this issue, because we know that right now the younger generation are going for the morning after pills in very high numbers.
Now,
is there a long-term effect of that?
Thank you, Trevor. Let me speak myself to that. Number one, a morning after pill is an emergency pill. An emergency pill has very high doses of the hormonal contraceptives that we talk about. And hormonal contraceptives, basically, it's like you are taking 30 pills in one tablet. That is something that I think everybody needs to know. So it's not like the go-to, kind of option that you might have, because anything in its attendant measure has its own consequences and sequelae that may develop. These are definitely hormones. They have effect on your body. Definitely they have been tried and they have been found to be safe for their specific indication. But that is to say that it is not something that we need to push like jugu or pills that you can take at will. No, far from it. Any medical product has its own side effects and is made for a specific reason and is not for sort of abuse like we are seeing right now. And when I see a person who is using, for example, an emergency contraceptive, it basically means that there was a failure in some aspects, because there are situations where emergency pills become mandatory, a case like sexual assault, like we're talking about, rape and all that. Then we have to initiate those processes to make sure that you do not have consequences of things that you did not intend. But things that are fairly within your control, then I think it is sort of an abuse of what is meant to be a noble issue, and we are seeing the effects of that, and we are paying heavily. One of the things that we are seeing right now is the resurgence of HIV among users of emergency pills and hormonal contraceptives. Why? Again, because if this generation, for example, is going for emergency pills more frequently than often, then it basically tells a story that something happened that was not very safe for you. I'm not even worried about the pregnancy that everybody is worried about. My worry is the consequences that may come with unprotected sex that has occurred for you to necessarily to use the emergency pill. And we are talking about HIV, we are talking about STIs, and I need to say that we've carried a huge trial that was done by WHO and global bodies just 2 years ago, and we saw that the incidence of HIV among this young generation that is using hormonal contraceptives was actually 23% higher than the general population. That is something that should be giving you a sleepless night, because in short, we are basically losing, a generation to new infections at a time that we are supposed to be controlling them. And why is that so, Trevor? Again, it goes again to what I said earlier about the stage of development. At the age of maybe 13, the teenagehood, what is worrying you is affirmation again. Yeah. And it's like you worry about what is going to have an impact right now. I don't want my friends to know that I have a ball. I don't want my parents to discover that I had sex. So we can worry about HIV and STIs later, but now and then let us prevent the pregnancy. That's the kind of narrative. Yeah. And I need to tell the public very clearly, and the country, loud and clear, that you cannot use contraceptives or family planning to treat sex. We need to deal with the issue of inappropriate sex, because that's where the rain started BTS. When we're able to correct that, then these other issues will fall into place. So about what methods work, I wouldn't say there's any that is good or that is bad. It all depends on you. And we have various methods, and I can spend the whole day talking about different methods of family planning for each and everyone according to the need and according to the medical condition that you are in. Yeah. But for teenagers, if the worst comes to the worst and we have to go one way or another, please, I will insist on strictly using barrier methods, and we are talking about condoms for the simple reason that they have triple protection against HIV, against STIs. Yeah. And that is for very exceptional cases, but ideally, I hope we can get to a situation where we can normalize not having sex and make it the in thing and make it the vibe of the nation. Then we'll have gotten somewhere if we can talk like that. Okay. Instead of talking about, mopping the floor when the tap is still running. That does not help the nation much. Yeah.
And Dr. Rose, I'd like to bring you in on that issue of mopping the floor when the tap is also still running, because now we know that out of research, the younger generation are more scared of being pregnant than contracting other diseases. How do you have this conversation in a way that people understand the risk that this poses to them and even the other generations? Because from the HIV report that we saw, and yesterday was World AIDS Day, the age of 15 to 29 are the most infected new infections with HIV now.
Thank you so much, Trevor, for that question. Many of us grew up in an era where probably HIV wasn't as much, and the concern more was on pregnancy. And the communication that was done to us from our parents was, you sleep with a boy, you get pregnant. Not even you sleep with a boy, actually. They would tell us, you are somewhere with a boy touches you or something. There was a lot of fear that was passed. So people fear pregnancy, the younger generation, because that is what they can see. However, it's important to be reminded that the issue of engaging in premarital or in early sex, it's not so much about the act, but it's about the values. And even as much as the younger ones look at us and they think that we are dinosaurs, because probably we grew up at a time where there was no, there were no digital platforms, there was no social media. There are values that cut across generations. And these are values of humanity, values of morality, diligence, hard work, empathy, delayed gratification. So what we are saying is that we are saying the sexual desire is there, but self-control. Because what actually we are saying when we can't wait for the right time is that we want to have it, the pleasure here and now. And it's not just about sex, it cuts across every other decision, every other choice that we make. And these are values that everybody needs to develop. It's important for this information to sink for this information to get to the right audience, I mean, that is now to the children, it's important for them to have trust. When they don't have trust and the parent is talking to them, they'll be looking at you like, get out of here, what are you talking about? But when they trust, they know that you have their interest at heart and you're communicating and you're reminding them, because again, sexuality education changes over time. The communication that you're passing to a preteen is not the same that you're passing to a teenage. I have actually had some teenagers telling me that because they have been told that having heterosexual sex with a boy or with a girl is a problem, you find when they are approached by homosexuals, that's another story altogether. Maybe it's a girl and she's being approached by a girl, a lesbian. She doesn't think there's anything wrong because she was warned against boys, okay? So here we are talking about values that cut across because of lack of self-control, giving in to the sexual desire at that time and not waiting for the right time.
Okay. I'd like to take closing remarks from all of you on this conversation because we are running out of time here. Who will start with you? Where do we go from here? You said that you don't have the guidance, the parental guiding book. But where do we go from here?
Wow, thanks so much for this forum, Trevor. I think, first of all, it's so important to open up these conversations as much as possible, where we are sitting across. I think we were talking on the break. I was saying to Abigail that it's important that we have forums where parents and teens have conversations, have candid conversations, so that we can understand what is the issue, right? But also just doing your best as the parent, understanding that that is the one ball you have to just keep holding. Let the other balls drop. But this one, you have to figure out how to keep it afloat. Get enough tools, get enough information, have a relationship with your child, but do not drop the ball. Whatever it takes to not drop the ball on the parenting, do it. Because later on, you will not blame the government, you will not blame society, you will not blame the school, it's your child. Okay.
Abigail, very closing remarks for you to your young people watching you today.
First of all, I'd like to thank you all for this opportunity. I'd like to say that you should just learn to realize your self-worth and love yourself enough not to do things that are going to jeopardize your safety, your even life, and just to take care of yourself and do the right thing, because you know what you're doing. It's not like you don't know. Yes, there's some parts that may be confusing to you, but just do the right thing and take care of yourself.
Okay. Dr. Rose, closing remarks on this. Where do we go from here?
Thank you so much for this opportunity. Mine will be mainly 2 points. I want to mention for our listeners what somebody is to do in case they are sexually abused. Number one is that do not shower. I know the shower is the thing that somebody wants to do because they are feeling defiled, but do not shower. Visit the nearest health facility. Preserve the evidence, because we said we need to hold the abusers accountable. So I just thought that it's important for us to have that very clearly and to say that children depend on adults. So yes, children may have the toll-free number, but I also feel that in a well-ordered society, in a community, children have that go-to adult. It could be the parent, the teacher, the uncle, somebody. They need to talk to an adult who will guide them and even support them. So let me talk to parents or even to caregivers. I would like to say that it's important for us to reflect on our own childhood, because ultimately the values that were passed to us and the messages, they are the ones that we pass to this generation. So we need to know that some of the messages were passed to us in love, but they may not have been wholesome. It's important for us to ask ourselves, what did we learn about sex? What were the experiences that shaped our own sexuality? How much do we know about this topic? If we don't know in this era of information, ignorance is a choice. Read a book, listen to a video, talk to somebody. Once you are equipped, then you will be able to pass it to your children. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Dr. Kaliti, closing remarks from you.
Thank you, Trevor, for this timely discussion at a time that this has become a national discourse and debate. Mine is to say that, again, I appeal to all of us that we have a generation at hand that needs our attention, that needs us to plug into them. And for all the parents and guardians, wherever you are, please plug into the life of your teenager, plug into the life of your child and be the sounding board for most of these things that we are seeing. because your absence is having a spiral effect and is affecting the society at large. That said, I want you to know that the government, and we have the highest commitment from His Excellency the President, and he has expressed it very well, that he's quite perplexed at the turn of events, and we are determined to turn the wheel for the sake of our future generation. And that said, we are putting measures in place, and we are offering the strategy and the guidance that is required for the nation, for everybody to be able to plug in and be able to normalize what is normal. And we must stop as a nation of normalize the abnormalities and accepting them as normal. It's good for us to know as a nation there is another way, there's a better way. It has been there, and it can be reinvented, and we can get back on track. Trevor.
All right. Thank you so much for speaking to us this morning, Dr. Stephen Kaliti, Head of Division of Reproductive and Maternal Health at the Ministry of Health, Dr. Rose Misati, a Public Health Specialist, Wahu Kagwe with us here, recording artist, and Abigail Mburu, who's a student and also a teenager. Thank you so much for this conversation. I hope we'll have more of it as time goes by. There's a lot coming through on Twitter here, but Wahu, I'd like to read one that is dedicated especially to you from one Omaribe Omwenga. It says, don't be ashamed of your story. It will inspire others. You're not a victim for sharing your story. You're a survivor setting the world on fire with your truth. And you never know who needs your light, your warmth, and your raging courage. That's where we leave it for now.